by way of introduction, if I may, Jan-Erik Petersen, who is an expert on ecosystems and accounting in the Biodiversity and Nature Unit at the European Environmental Bureau, or the Environmental Agency, rather, the EEA. Jan-Erik has been working at the EEA in Copenhagen since 2001, starting out as project manager responsible for the area of agriculture and environment. And since January 2016, he has focused his attention on natural capital accounting, where his tasks include representing the EEA in the EU project on accounting for natural capital and ecosystem services. So a warm welcome to yourself, Jan-Erik. Next up, I would like to welcome Blandine Camus, who is Food Systems Officer at the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN European Regional Office based in Brussels. Blandine is actively engaged in advancing policy solutions for agriculture, climate adaptation and sustainable local development, and works at the intersection of policy, science and communication. And the IUCN is, of course, one of the forum's strategic partners. Nice to meet you, Blandine. And of course, apologies, Elaine, yes, you remind me of my friend Aoife, that would explain why. Of course, Elaine Houlihan, my own fellow countrywoman, who served as the 39th National President of MACRA, which is the Young Farmers Organisation of Ireland from 2023 to 2025. It used to be known as MACRA na Feirme, which literally means stalwarts of the land, but it is now shortened to just MACRA. Elaine hails from a beef farm in Atlacha, County Limerick, not so far from County Cork. And Elaine also works, a busy lady, she's also a physiotherapist and is only the second woman to lead the farming organisation. So a warm welcome to yourself, Elaine. And we also have the pleasure of welcoming Brigitte Misson, who is joining us online. Good afternoon, Brigitte. Good afternoon, even. Good afternoon, lovely to see you. Kate Mila Falcha, as we say here, Brigitte. Just a quick introduction to yourself. You are the Acting Director in charge of Markets and the Head of Unit for Animal Products in the Commission's Directorate General for Agriculture and Rural Development. Brigitte holds overall responsibility for monitoring market developments, analysing economic trends, building up market knowledge. And remember that EU livestock strategy that I mentioned at the very beginning of our session, ladies and gentlemen, at the very top during my introduction. Brigitte is pretty much the pen holder behind that. So very much looking forward to your introductory comments. You all know the lay of the land by now. Each one of you will be asked to deliver a 5-minute impulse statement. And then at around 4 p.m. or so, we'll open it up to the floor for questions. This should generate quite a degree of engagement given the topic relevant for this country and, of course, beyond. And particularly when we look ahead to this EU livestock strategy that is gaining a lot of ground and gaining a lot of interest, Brigitte. So we look forward to hearing from yourself. Keep an eye on the time, Brigitte. Hopefully the line is clear from Brussels. We look forward to hearing your policy perspective. So when you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, Rose. And just let me know whether there is any problem with the sound or whether it's going fine.
Everyone okay with the sound? We can hear Brigitte clearly? Yes, all good, Brigitte. So in your own time, you take the floor.
Many thanks, Rose. So you have rightly set the scene, Rose. We are indeed in the last stages of preparing a livestock strategy. Maybe the question is, why do we need a livestock strategy, or do we need a livestock strategy? What we've seen is that we need indeed a long-term vision for livestock to ensure that the sector is crisis resilient, that's one aspect, globally competitive, second aspect, sustainable in all dimensions, environment, climate, but also economic and social sustainability, fitting Europe's territorial diversity, and let's add a fifth element, that the sector is driving for excellence. So what we are trying to do is to sketch all that in a direction that gives a future to the sector. Of course, this is based on our examination of what is available on the ground and of the experience of the last years. So the first element that I mentioned, crisis resilience, we've seen that development in recent years showed a certain vulnerability of the sector, vulnerability to market shocks, but also animal diseases and climate change. So if we want to tackle resilience, then we need to address those challenges. And we could think about improving risk management when we think about market volatility. But we can also think about reinforcing prevention and eradication of animal diseases. And of course, investing in climate change adaptation through innovation. So that's the first block. The second one, competitiveness. Yes, when you look at the range of animal products, you see that global competitiveness is a given. You cannot do without it. But maybe you would say, are we able to compete on prices? Maybe where Europe is able to compete is more on quality, traceability, reliability. That's a bit the partner we are on international markets. So how do we make those strengths even bigger? Maybe we try to increase efficiency through circular economy, feed autonomy. Maybe we try to develop high quality value chains. Maybe we try to promote market differentiation. And we try to champion reciprocity for EU standards on the global scene. So all these are avenues that we want to explore in the EU livestock strategy. Then the third chapter I mentioned, sustainability. We see that the sector needs to find a natural place in its environment. So looking for a balance between areas with high concentration and others in danger of land abandonment, where livestock used to have its roots in the past but has disappeared. So what could we do? What could we think of in the strategy? We could explore, for instance, on-farm renewable energy production to improve resource use. We could explore precision feeding, but also herd management to reduce emissions. And extensification, of course, is also an option, and that would support biodiversity and also provide carbon sinks. On the fourth aspect, this territorial aspect, we see that livestock farming is really sustaining rural communities. It is shaping landscapes. It's a backbone for the social fabric in areas where no other activity is in fact possible. So the strategy could open the way to support activity in vulnerable areas, empower local communities for cooperative projects around livestock farms, and hopefully attract a new generation of farmers. And then coming to the fifth aspect about excellence. So what could we mean by excellence? Of course, you all know that Europe's diversity is a strength. And each system should be supported to perform at its best, building on its specific characteristics. So this offers a full palette of opportunities from, of course, developing high-value value chains in rural areas, but also to equip indoor farms with state-of-the-art innovation that would reduce emissions and pollution. So this is a very wide landscape that I'm brushing there for you, but this is the ambition of this livestock strategy. So to try to propose actionable points in all those areas that would be, let's say, actions by the EU itself in some instances with the regulatory framework, other actions for member states, and in particular within their own plans, because you know that most of the common agricultural policy support is now channeled through plans, today CAP strategic plans, and tomorrow maybe national and regional partnership plans. And then, of course, actions at stakeholders level. So what can the sector do itself to embark on this strategy for the future? So that's it all from my side, Rose, as an impulse speech.
Thank you very much indeed, Brigitte. I think I was listening very attentively to see if there was any element that you might sneak in that is that is sort of gives us a real scoop in terms of what might be in the strategy. But you said that DG Agri is in the final stages of preparing this draft strategy. Are you still on course to unveil it on July the 7th, as was previously planned?
That's still written like that in the agenda of the Commissioners' College, because it will be, of course, a text adopted by all commissioners. And yes, so far it's still on their agenda for the 7th of July.
Okay, well listen, I'll come back to you on some of the points that you raised, particularly on reciprocity of European standards, which I found quite interesting indeed. So we'll come back in a moment, but I will turn to yourself, Jan Erik, from the EEA, so the European Environmental Agency based in Copenhagen. This whole question of sustainable livestock production, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say on the matter.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. It's been very interesting to listen in. And what I'm going to talk about is more of a pastoral vision of livestock rather than the mainstream livestock production that, of course, produces the majority of our livestock products. It's sort of a EU pendant to Brendan Dunford's PhD thesis in Burren. And I have 6 key messages. So the first key message is that in many people's vision, forests are the pinnacle of nature. Large trees, full cover, etc. But that's actually not what our landscape looks like, and that's not what rich biodiversity looks like. We had always very large herbivores that were disturbing the landscape, uprooting trees, grazing vegetation and grass, and creating open spaces. So we had a very diverse landscape. And this diverse landscape creates many different niches for many different species. So that is an important principle for looking how we can shape the landscape so it maintains as much biodiversity as possible. And large herbivores, large grazers have had a crucial role for hundreds of thousands of years. Think extinct elephant species roaming Europe, mammoths, aurochs, bison. These over time, in historic times, have been replaced by domestic livestock. From aurochs, we went to cattle. From wild sheep, we went to domesticated sheep. So there's a line from the large mammoth-type grazers to domestic livestock. They have a major role in creating European landscapes and European biological diversity. And so that's my third message, that we know from scientific work that about 1/3 of all the habitats that are listed as worthy of special protection in the EU Habitats Directive, about 1/3 of those habitats depend on traditional grazing or mowing practices. So that's an important message that farming, if it's done in a way that supports biodiversity, is crucial for actually achieving EU nature conservation goals. And to actually look at what significance this type of farming has for EU nature conservation, we try to quantify it in a recent EEA study that we have summarized in a briefing and a long technical study. I hope we can make the links available. So we basically looked at what is the area that member states report that exists for these around 64 habitats on the Annex 1. That area is really large, actually. It's around 35 million hectares. That would be equivalent to about 22% of the official EU farmland area. So it's a large area which goes beyond what's currently farmed, because a lot of these habitats are under abandonment, but it's really a significant area. And the second dimension we needed to know was, what is the livestock density that is suitable for managing these habitats to recreate or maintain the species diversity? And not surprisingly, it's often quite low. It goes, the majority is from 0.05 livestock units per hectare during the grazing season to 0.5 livestock units per hectare during grazing seasons, going up to 1 or 1.5 livestock units for productive habitat types. And if we then multiply the area with the livestock density, we know how many ruminants we need to actually graze. And there's a lot of uncertainties in these numbers, but basically if we multiply the area by livestock density, we arrive at a number of livestock that corresponds to 10 to 15% of the total EU ruminant population, so total cattle, sheep, goats, and potentially horses. So that's a really large number of animals, but of course a fairly small share of livestock production that has a particularly critical role for maintaining EU habitats. So therefore, we think it's important that we recognize the contribution of extensive farming systems for biological conservation. As we've heard, they have an important role often in the most marginal areas, where we also have high wildfire risk. We know grazing reduces wildfire risk because it takes us biomass. So there's a number of win-wins from maintaining these livestock systems. And we feel that agriculture policy and society needs to recognize the value we have from these extensive systems. Okay. And I hope our study can contribute to that. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. So we'll be, I suppose, the obvious question I'll be coming back to you is, I suppose, intensive farming systems, and where do they sit in all of that, given your study and given your background in the EEA. But thank you very much indeed, Jan Erik. Blondine, you're coming from a different perspective at the IUCN. So we'd be very interested to hear, I suppose, what you think about sustainable livestock practices and what you'd like to see coming out of this livestock strategy that Brigitte is currently working on. So we look forward to hearing from you, and keep an eye on the time. Go right ahead, Blondine, now.
Thank you very much, Rose, and happy to be here today and to follow up also on some of the messages. I'll try not to repeat those, so maybe to share some key messages from IUCN perspective. What we'd like to really share is that livestock systems and nature should not be seen as opposing. Quite on the contrary, it has been said they're a bit two sides of the same coin, given that, of course, they do operate within ecological boundaries. And here there are maybe, let's say, three kind of ingredients that we would like to put forward. The first one is really to encourage more sustainable farming practices, and that includes, of course, throughout the livestock strategy, but further on throughout the common agriculture policy. It is challenging because obviously there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and we know that the livestock systems in Europe were extremely diverse, but still there is a range of practices, of approaches that can really support the transition of the sector more globally. Secondly, what we need is also critically policy coherence across our different frameworks. What we observe is that still we're very much approaching agriculture, diets, biodiversity, climate as separate topics. And it has been also tackled a bit upon in the previous panel that we need also to bring back consumers and diet into the debate. So from our perspective, what we need to move towards is also a way more systemic approach to food, to agriculture that includes livestock, one that truly also reconnects production and the health of ecosystems. And of course, here the next EU budget, the next EU programming period are offering also interesting opportunities for policy alignment. I'm thinking here especially between the Common Agriculture Policy and the Nature Restoration Regulation, which will be critical, and where really livestock is a leverage that we can use for nature restoration. Again, these are not opposing elements, but they can work really together if we support the practices that can deliver. And third and last point, what we also need to encourage is dialogue. Moving on to more sustainable farming practices will require to move from dialogues and debates that are a bit sometimes polarized, and to move to a more inclusive, science-based discussion with all stakeholders. And here, of course, we'd like to say that IUCN is not an opponent to agriculture, not an opponent to livestock farming, but rather would like to bring in evidence and science and solutions for not only livestock here in particular, but also agriculture as a whole. And of course, it's extremely challenging because the livestock topic touches upon here the livestock production models that we have in Europe. It touches upon our diet, our biodiversity, but also our rural livelihoods, cultural identities, even traditions. So it is challenging, but it is actually because it's challenging that we need really that dialogue, and that the dialogue needs also to be continued after the publication of the livestock strategy, because it's really a long-term process, and we really need to continue that process. And I think that the Forum for the Future of Agriculture is really a keystone in that process here.
Thank you very much indeed,
you.
Blandine. Now, Elaine, you're coming from an entirely different perspective. You've heard from the policymaker over in Brussels, who's the pen holder for this livestock strategy. You've heard the scientist, the environmentalist, and you've heard IUCN's perspective on that sustainable approach. You're a farmer on the ground. You represented a very powerful young farmers organisation here in Ireland, presumably a lot of livestock farmers involved in that said organisation. Please, we look forward to hearing from your point of view and picking up perhaps on what you've heard from your counterparts on the panel.
Yeah, I suppose, look, just a tiny bit of background, MOCRA has the opportunity to always feed into, I suppose, all these strategies and everything through CEJA. So we would have been involved at the start. But I suppose when we look at Ireland, for generations, livestock farming has been the heart of rural communities across Ireland and Europe, especially my small village. We're all farmers. There's nobody else in the village. We don't even have a shop. But I suppose livestock, we provide food security, support local economies, sustain farm families, and shape landscape that millions of, I suppose, Europeans and Irish people value. As young people, we're extremely proud of legacies. I'm extremely proud, I suppose, of my legacy. I'm in a partnership with my mum that has always been in a female's name. So I suppose legacy is a massive thing. But we're also, I suppose, the generation that's going to deliver the next chapter if we're given the opportunity to deliver that chapter. The EU livestock strategy must recognise a simple reality. Sustainability has 3 pillars: environmental, economic, and social. Too often, the debate only focuses on one of these. If we want a sustainable livestock sector, farmers must be able to earn a viable income, rural communities must retain its vibrancy, and environmental progress must be achieved in partnership with those producing our food. Irish farmers have already demonstrated their commitment to climate action. We've improved breeding efficiency, reduced emissions, invested in animal health and welfare, adopted new technologies, and embracing innovation on our farms where possible, as some of us still don't have internet on our farms. The challenges ahead are significant, but so too is the willingness of farmers to be part of the solution. However, ambition must be matched with support. Young people will only enter livestock farming if they see a future in it. That means fair returns from the marketplace, access to land, finance, investment in research and innovation, and policies that reward farmers for their environmental good and public benefits they provide. The strategy must also acknowledge the diversity of European agriculture. Grass-based livestock systems, such as those in Ireland, differ significantly from the more intensive production systems elsewhere. A one-size-all approach will not deliver the best outcome for farmers, consumers, or the environment. As a young farmer, we are not asking for special treatment. We're asking for a framework that gives us the confidence to invest, innovate, and build resilience, a resilient farm business for our future. We want to produce high-quality food, protect our environment, and contribute to a thriving rural community. But we need policies to work with us, not against us. As many people say, there's no young people that want to farm, but believe me, we want to farm. The success of an EU livestock policy will ultimately be measured by whether it enables the next generation to stay farming and continue producing sustainable food for Europe. That must be the centre of every single decision made going forward if we are to be given the opportunity to write the next chapter.
Well said, Elaine. Well said indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Said like a true MOCRA president, past, most immediately past. Brigitte, I turn to you now. Elaine's very strong message there. One size does not fit all. One size all is not the approach that she wants to see on the table. Can you grant her some reassurances as a young farmer on the ground from a village in County Limerick, Brigitte, who is awaiting patiently for the strategy that you are currently drafting? So perhaps respond first, I suppose, to the young farmer's perspective as a member of SEJA in Brussels.
As Helene has rightly pointed out, young farmers have been very closely integrated in the process that is leading to the livestock strategy. So indeed, nearly all the points, I should say, all the points that have just been mentioned are the ones that we are taking account of in the strategy. What I did not say in the introductory speech is that the strategy comes at the end, it's not the end, but at the end of 12 months of intense meetings with everybody concerned, both in the livestock supply chain from farmers to consumers, but also with member states authorities and with NGOs, academics, etc. We have met very frequently in what we call a livestock work stream. And the ideas that were developed in that work stream should find their place in the strategy. And indeed, this aspect of territoriality that I mentioned is the one that looks at the fact that Europe is diverse and diversity is a strength. And it means that when we mainstream excellence, it means excellence for each production system with the reality around that production system and trying to take the best out of it. And I've mentioned two opposite examples. So you could have in a mountain area, you could have a high value chain built around traditional cheese manufacture on farm, for instance, and you could build resilience and sustainability around it, so fully embedded in the rural area. But you can also look at indoor farming, and there you can invest, incentivize the uptake of state-of-the-art equipment that allows to lower emissions, to lower pollution, to have better efficiency in resource use, etc. So the strategy wants to look at all types of farmings, at all realities, and try to show a way forward.
Okay, thank you for that, Brigitte. Just a quick question. Something that the Irish are following very closely at the moment is the nitrates review. And I understand that that is also due to be unveiled before the summer. Could we expect that the two might coincide, the livestock strategy and this review of the nitrates directive?
I cannot say that it will be both on the 7th of July, but you're right, Rose, it's also foreseen for the summer. So, okay, we have 3 months for the summer. So let's see when the nitrates directive review will finally land on our tables. But indeed, there should not be a big difference in time between the two.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Jan Erik, I might turn to yourself now. I suppose you spoke a lot really about the extensive livestock systems. Let's turn to the more intensive approach, right? What concrete elements would you like to see from the EEA perspective in this livestock strategy when it comes to the intensity of farming production in a bid to sort of reduce emissions? And also, well, I'll focus really on emissions because that's your area of expertise as opposed to volatility, which is a much broader question. So what would you like to see in there?
Well, okay, I've dealt with agriculture and environment in general. Obviously, it would be good to see emission reductions. There is various strategies that have been discussed in previous sessions. We haven't got a formal input to that. But I would like to reflect on livestock systems in the more productive regions where they're generally more intensive, also in a biodiversity perspective. Because if I travel from Copenhagen to my home village in northern Germany, I hardly see any cattle on the fields. Certainly no dairy cows, maybe some conservation grazing or Sakla cow herds. And that is a major problem from a biodiversity perspective. Several years ago, there was a major dialogue and upheaval about the rapidly declining insect populations. The fact that there's no livestock grazing out on the fields is one key reason for it. Not only because their manure is missing, but also because the animals as a source through blood and sweat are missing. And so that's one dimension we shouldn't forget. What I would say is that you cannot expect someone who has a high-yielding dairy herd to farm like a farmer with Sakla herd in the Barren. However, you have young livestock, you may have sort of a sideline of some sheep, and there is in nearly all regions of Europe, there is pockets of vegetation that we want to recreate or that is still there that needs grazing. So my own brother has a few highland cattle that help me graze one nature conservation area. So sometimes it's not possible because farmers are very busy. No one can maintain just 10 cattle for fun. But there is opportunities for combination, certainly also with young livestock that don't have the same requirements as maybe dairy cows would have. So I think there is really opportunities that we should grasp, and we shouldn't just say divide between the biodiversity producing regions and the regions focused on output.
Okay, thank you for that indeed. Blondine, you raised a number of interesting points, I think, during your introductory comments. You spoke about this idea of livestock systems being compatible with nature restoration goals. You said that these should not be opposing elements. You might dig down a little bit into that, Blondine.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, in terms of nature restoration, I mean, answer short, yes, livestock farming is compatible with the objectives of the nature restoration regulation. Again, given that they are also operating within the ecological boundaries. And here there is quite a set of sustainable practices that IUCN has been highlighting to really support the sustainability of the sector. Just to name a few, that includes, of course, mixed farming systems, free-range, pasture-based, extensive livestock systems, reduced livestock densities, but also the use of some agroecology principles like the use of local breeds, agroforestry approaches like silvopastoral. I mean, there are really many of them. Another interesting concept to deliver on nature restoration is, of course, also nature-based solutions. And here, I think really nature-based solutions are specifically interesting in the livestock sector for two reasons. The first one is really because nature-based solutions are not a silver bullet. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's extremely context-specific. And because livestock systems in Europe are very context-specific, and we were saying just right now that there are really different kind of models, then they would really enable to adapt those solutions to the different farm realities on the ground. And the second reason is also because nature-based solutions are very much adopting this kind of holistic approach to sustainability. And I think that in this debate, we're also very much focusing on the socio-economic also aspects of livestock farming. And so here, the nature-based solution standard can also help to achieve that. But coming back maybe to the nature restoration point, maybe let me give you a more concrete example, because we were discussing just now about grasslands. Well, we know that currently in Europe, almost half of grasslands are in a quite bad conservation status, and this calls for a more ambitious action under nature restoration. We also know that currently member states are drafting their plans for September, and IUCN is supporting several of them in that process. And just to provide a concrete example, we've provided the French government with a set of recommendations for their nature restoration plan. And some of them do include measures for grasslands, some of them being very relevant to the livestock sector. That includes, for instance, to avoid, of course, the conversion of grasslands to arable land. That includes also, again, adapting livestock densities, promoting late mowing, avoiding the use of fertilizers, and so on and so forth. So all in all, the idea is not livestock. It is more the practice. So the problem is not wow, but it's really how. It's not what, but how. So here again, we hope that for many synergies to be brought by the next EU programming period, by the next EU budget, especially again in between. And that's something that we hope for the livestock strategy to bring, to really build that bridge between the future CAP plans and also the nature restoration plans, because
More
it's really
complementarity between the two, I guess. Yeah, that's what you're after.
Exactly. And between the financing purposes, we were discussing financing right before, so the measures and also the funding for farmers.
Sure. Thank you very much indeed, Blondine. Elaine, I want to dig down a little bit to yourself, actually. You mentioned that you're in partnership with your mom, that your farm has always been in a female-led name. That's admirable, given our history over the past 100 years. So well done to yourself and your family. Maybe you can paint a picture, I suppose, really, for our audience of what it's like being a farmer now, a young woman in the sector, and some of the challenges that you're facing, particularly feeding into this whole discussion on sustainable. You say the whole village of Atlaca is involved in farming, that there isn't even a shop. And I suppose that spoke earlier a little bit, it's going back to Stuart's point about the culture. And you said yourself that sustainability is economic, environmental, and social. And I suppose that idea of generational renewal as well that you've mentioned, and certainly MOCRA is a great organisation for, I mean, that's a lot now, that's a loaded question. But I think just painting a picture of someone on the ground, I think would be of interest to us here in the audience.
Yeah, I suppose looking at our farm at home, it's quite interesting. Growing up, I was a dairy farm. I always thought I wanted to be a dairy farmer, sitting in the pit with my dad. Couldn't wait to cycle down to get the cows. Was a big thing. But we got out of dairy cows because of it being so labour intensive, because we actually have an engineering company as well at home. So we moved into the beef sector. We had a suckler herd, a quite large suckler herd. I've never seen somebody to love suckler so much as my father.
How many now, Elaine, are we talking about?
My dad would have had over, I suppose, about the 150 mark when I was young. That has now reduced down to 40. And this is getting smaller year on year. By the time, I suppose, in the next year or two, if I wanted to go home and farm, I'm actually unsure if we'd even have sucklers left. Okay. Because it's just so volatile.
The cost
of everything. To look at it, my father has no degree in engineering. He had to turn his hand to keep, I suppose, myself, my brother, and my mother going. He decided to take into welding. And little did he know that the company blew up to what it is today. And that is, I suppose, for the last 20 years, he's had that on the side to prop up the farm.
I see what you mean, yeah.
It's completely, we're relying on the engineering company, to be very honest. So that's the home farm. We have another farm as well, myself and my mum. It's, I suppose, dairy beef that we're doing there. We buy in the calves. They're reared on an automatic feeder, as my father would say, and my mother. If you can get a machine to do it, why don't you do it? So I suppose we are quite progressive that way. Yeah. But for a young person, do I see a future for myself? Yeah. No, is the simple answer. And I've stood up and represented young farmers for 2 years saying that we want to farm, and it's been thrown back in my face that you don't want to farm at all. But I think it's when you go down to the grassroots members and actually talk to young people and see that, I suppose, ambition and drive that's there. Like my rural village, I'd give anything to go back and live in Atlaca, but I can't get planning permission. And I know that the home farm is there for my brother. The out farm is actually in Drummond Atlaca, so I'm up in Drummond, is the farm outside there. But I know I'll never get planning permission there either because it's inside in a little cul-de-sac. Okay. There's grass in the middle of the road going into that farm. But it's just to see that hope and ambition. I just hope that like when I actually even think of the passion that I have, that like more people need the young people to speak up, because even when we talk about generation renewal, it's always the older person. If you think back to any panel that you've been at, it's probably an older person than me sitting up here talking about generation renewal, that they don't want to leave over the farm to their son because he's after getting married and they're scared that there's going to be a divorce and the farm's going to be halved. We're going to have all that narrative there. But nobody ever asks like that fear that we have of sparking that conversation at home around generation renewal. Like sitting at the kitchen table, and I suppose I've always been outspoken in my life, and at the age of 16, I sat my parents down and goes, well, what's the story here?
Is it me or the brother? Is it me or the brother who are getting the farm?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people wouldn't put myself and my brother together because he's a lot quieter. But like we had that discussion when I was 16 and he was 18. So we know that path going forward. But when I came into the role of MACRA president, and I was the youngest president and still am the youngest president in the history of MACRA, at the age of 27 to take over and listen to people that still haven't had that conversation. Like, we need to get that out there. And I suppose that's where, when you look at the livestock sector, it's probably the one sector here in Ireland that's on its knees with young people. Because, look, I'm a prime example. I'm off farm working. I'm a physio. Would I have always wanted to stay there? Absolutely, but it wasn't viable, you know?
These are big questions, absolutely big questions. Brigitte, I suppose in a way we look to you because, you know, this livestock strategy, this is the reality on the ground, right? You know, there's a lot of talk at the moment about attracting young people into the sector. And you started off by saying, why do we need the livestock strategy, this sort of long-term vision? But I mean, it's quite aspirational because will there be farmers on the ground to rear the cattle, to rear the sheep, and to have that, I suppose, you know, vital part of the economy going forward in a sustainable way? So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a very, very crucial point, and I've listened very carefully to Elaine, and it was at a certain point heartbreaking for me to listen to what she was saying so openly, and I had not realized that there would not be naturally that conversation in farms about what's the future. So the academic reply to you, Rose, so if I try not to focus on Elaine, who has really touched my heart, is yes, we have this generational renewal strategy. We mean it for sure. So to try to have true tools to help young farmers, in particular this relief system that would allow farmers to organize themselves and to have holidays, which is something fully normal for every citizen, but not necessarily for farmers. So trying to organize life so that the quality of life improves and that it's not like a vocation to become a farmer, but that you can really make a normal life with it, and that it can also attract a partner if you don't want to stay alone in your farm. But of course, everything around access to land, access to capital. So really trying to give more support, more EU support to young farmers, to earmark a certain amount of budget for them, to make sure that they have higher support rates for the various instruments that are available. So there is a true offer on the ground. But if young farmers themselves feel that it's not a future for them, then we can put on the table all the tools that we want. We will not be successful. So I'm still very much hoping that the offer is sufficiently attractive to make young farmers make that step. But what is the most important, and what we've tried to do with the livestock strategy, is to talk positively about the future, to tackle market volatility, to try to put farmers in an environment where they feel that they are welcome, that they are really contributing to society around themselves, that they are not looked at as something that is bad for the environment, for nature or things like that. So really try to give them an environment that makes it attractive, both from an economic point of view and from a societal point of view, which when you are young is really very important. So that's what we try to offer with the livestock strategy. So let's see whether we can keep up that ambition.
Thank you very much indeed, Brigitte. We will be waiting with bated breath to see the results of that strategy. I'm going to open it up now to the floor for some questions and answers. this gentleman right here. And perhaps just to say to whom it's addressed as well, in case we need to involve Brigitte in the conversation.
Yeah, just to the panel, Adam Woods, editor, Irish Farmers Journal. We've seen a large decline in the number of farmers keeping livestock on marginal land, particularly in the west of Ireland. You know, that's high nature value farmland. And with that has come problems around undergrazing, invasive species, you know, rural decline and generational renewal. And I'd like to get the panel's views on whether we should turn things round again and start linking supports back to livestock, some form of production or some form of deliverables. Do we need to rethink that policy?
Okay, thank you very much, Adam. Congrats on the new job.
Yes, so the EA doesn't do policy advice, but I give you a personal opinion anyway. First of all, appreciate the point you're making. There have been elements that allow that. I believe we could go back to what Brendan Dunford presented, results-based payment. You can measure the impact of grazing on the vegetation, etc. So I think that would be a route forward. If I may, one additional comment, just to be a bit, to contribute. We know that a key factor in the lack of competitiveness of extensive system is they're very labor intensive. I've just visited an amazing upland farming system in northern Portugal. And what they look towards is how can they use satellite-based fencing, no fence, automated systems. The problem is that, of course, there is no money in these systems, so they are not going to pay for investment by industry. So the question is, can we create some public investment for such systems so we have some fundamentals that make it worthwhile for private industry to improve the offers that are available? I think that would be one way we can try to think forward rather than despair.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that response. Doug.
Thank you. So yeah, a lot of issues to address there. Sorry, I'm going to add one. Just thinking, because that's the strategy sounds really great. However, I mean, there are areas in Europe and in Ireland that it's already too late. I'm just wondering, you know, so we do a lot of surveying of peatlands around Ireland. So in one survey in Donegal, the farmer we were doing the work for said there's a 45-mile road, and there's only 3 farmers left. Mm-hmm. So what about those? Sorry, I don't want to add more problems to the list, apologies. But for those, and what's going to happen there from a peatland perspective, it's all going to go to moorgrass and rhododendron, which is a disaster. So are there any plans, or is there anything in the offing to think about? And then, of course, once the farm families are gone from those areas, how are we going to get them back? Sorry,
Okay.
I don't want to be a pain. But
No, Doug, you speak words of truth there. Could I ask the organisers perhaps to shut the shutters? Just a lot of noise coming in. Shut the window if you don't mind. Thanks, Doug, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. Land abandonment, I suppose we're talking about here, Brigitte. Land abandonment, and then how do we restock? You know, we'd be looking forward to. You mentioned that this is going to be one pillar of the strategy. I'd be interested to know what sort of ideas and what sort of measures you have in the offing.
Yes, indeed. That's one of the areas that we wanted to explore, because if you want to find solutions for high livestock density areas, then automatically you try to find a balance with areas threatened by land abandonment. And what we are coming up with, and maybe you will tell me this is utopia and you will not manage, but what we thought is that we can have back livestock where they belong to, so in those areas where they were at the origin, if we manage to create a full ecosystem with them, meaning that you cannot have a farmer if you don't have in the region, so not too far, some slaughterhouses, processing industries, some markets to valorize the product. So it's a whole ecosystem that we need to attract to those areas. And of course, we need to do it in a way that respects nature, that is respecting also the society that is there. So that's a bit the ambition we have, and maybe to couple it with the previous question, we have a number of support incentives in the future common agricultural policy that would incentivize extensive livestock farming, for instance, and it would also allow for some coupled payments where it is justified, and also for some more support to accompany what we could call virtuous farming practices. So if you put all that together, and if actors on the ground agree to play with, then we have a chance to, with livestock, to revive those areas threatened by land abandonment.
Okay, thank you very much. And I suppose the fundamental question is getting those farmers. Elaine, that speaks to yourself and your commentary. But just one moment, Mark, you have a question. Mark Titterington, get a mic over to Mark. And who's the question for, Mark?
Well, ultimately will be for Brigitte. As you alluded to when I was on the stage, I've had the privilege of participating in a number of our business missions, most recently last week to Thailand. And you see just how highly regarded, particularly our dairy produce is when you go to these places. It's a strategic asset for the European Union, for sure. And to use your words, Brigitte, how do you valorize that? How do you ensure that that value that is represented outside Europe flows all the way back to the farm gate? Because our farmers should be proud to be part of that, and they should be rewarded for being part of it as well. My question, I think, to Brigitte, but perhaps to all the panelists, if you were to go 5 years on, we're on July 7th, 2031, you know, what positive change would you point to that this livestock strategy will have catalyzed? What would be the most important thing for you? And maybe an additional one to you, Brigitte, would be, you talked there about how do you orchestrate the different actors, the processors, the people that need to invest in our rural communities to make it attractive to people to live there and work there. How do we do that? How will we do that through the livestock strategy?
Okay. Detailed question there, Brigitte, but we'll turn first perhaps, and you mentioned it in your introduction, the pillar of excellency, right? This idea of market differentiation that you spoke about. A lot of trade missions going on at the moment with your political master, Commissioner Hansen. How do we valorize that sense of excellence and let that trickle down to farmers on the ground? Just sort of what sort of ideas are being percolated at the moment in the strategy?
Maybe the first thing that is not always in the minds of everybody, this excellence that we can really feel, that we can touch with our fingers when we are abroad. So the fact that really customers abroad, they value European excellence. So they really see, they have in mind a picture that we are reliable partners, that we are producing safe food, good food, quality food, and that what we are bringing to them has a true value. As I was saying at the start, as you referred to, Rose, maybe we are not able always to compete on price, but we are able to compete on that reputation. And what is very striking for me, in particular when I talk to farmers, which I try to do as much as I can, is that farmers themselves are not conscious of it. So they are not conscious that this value, we see it in the eyes of the customers. So indeed, there is a need to make farmers conscious about that, and there is a need to make the value chain allow for farmers to be conscious of it, and the best consciousness, of course, comes with money, so with remuneration of the farmer's part. And that's, as you know, the hardest part of this history. If we take the dairy sector, as this was mentioned as an example, we have been trying for the last 16 years now, so it started in 2010, to try to have this value chain a more virtuous one. So to make sure that each step has what it needs to survive, and not only to survive, but to invest in the next step. So again, we try to do it with what we call the Common Market Organization, so trying to have healthy negotiation power along the supply chain. And you can only achieve that if it is a win-win for everyone. So there is no magic tool. So we continue to try. We continue to try to allow the various actors in the chain to dialogue, to negotiate, to talk to one another on a level playing field. So to make sure that each one can best valorize its strength.
Okay, thank you, Brigitte. Blondine, I'm turning to you. You spoke earlier, and it's picking up on Mark's point there, positive change. How do we catalyze on that? How do we generate that positive change for the sector going forward? From your point of view, you spoke about promoting dialogue. You spoke about bringing in actors such as consumers, integrating the whole idea of diet, nutrition. So I'd be interested to hear your point of view from the IUCN perspective.
Yeah, well, I suppose that indeed, as I said again before, the dialogue here is critical. We need to work with all the institutions, we need to work with science, we need to work with farmers, young farmers. We need to work with civil society and consumers. Again, we said it before. And if I take the question on where we would like to see the livestock sector a bit like in 5 years, well, the strategy is only here to provide a vision and to set up a kind of action plan, right? What we'll need afterwards, of course, is the policies that will give the implementation pathways to that strategy. Diet is part of it, truly part of the problem. We can also think about animal welfare, and I think that also there are a couple of elements that can be interesting in that strategy. We know animal welfare and biodiversity outcomes are really also extremely intertwined here. So really to have that strategy that brings a coherent and also a clear vision here, building also on what we have said also throughout the day, that indeed farmers need that long-term vision to make the investments and to make the decisions then to invest in those sustainable solutions. So a sustainable vision and long-term vision that is kind of the core of the strategy. And if I understand well, also the debate and the discussion is expected to continue afterwards through the work stream, the livestock work stream. So this also something, of course, that we do welcome, yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Of course, the livestock work stream. The next, Brigitte, of course, a busy lady. She chairs that livestock work stream. The next meeting, I understand, is on June 17th. But Elaine, I turn to you, picking up on Mark's point about this, I suppose, the positive image. How do you think we should be taking the bull by the horns? You'll understand this as a metaphor for driving sort of like that positive idea about the livestock sector. What should be being done? What isn't being done? I'd like to hear from yourself, a farmer on the ground.
Yeah, I suppose, look, this strategy could offers everything, but there's one massive problem. We've said it, land abandonment. Right. We don't have young people in rural communities. It all starts with trying to get them back into rural communities. That's where you need your planning permission. You need, I suppose, Board Bia markets our products here in Ireland. We need more buy local, shop local. And I suppose that's down to the media too here in the room to spin that narrative. Like that's one thing, like it can't all fall back on us as a farmer, because the consumer too also, I suppose, consumes the food that we produce.
Do you think there's a negative image
yes.
for livestock production? Do you think that, I don't know, government agencies, media, Boards Bia, do you think they're doing enough to perhaps address that, to remedy that?
Look, I think that we'll say Board Bia markets, they're doing their job, but there's one thing that influences society more than anything, and that is media and social media. Okay. The pin stops there, and I can see you there. The pin stops with ye. It's whatever story ye put into the papers. It's whatever story we go out to here and put on LinkedIn. That's what people believe. That is, I suppose, the older generation in particular. They see it in black and white, and I suppose paper never refused ink. But in their eyes, they see that as gospel. It's like us, we see a TikTok video at my age and younger, see a TikTok video of 15 seconds, that's gospel. And I suppose that's one thing too. All of us inside in this room have a responsibility now to go out and highlight what we are doing. The young farmers are, I suppose, there throughout Ireland. We're showcasing the best of what we do. look at the demo farms, look at the signpost farms, look exactly at what we are doing and what we can do. But I suppose that's where we need the older generation to believe in us to carry on a legacy that they have carried on. Like, give us the opportunity to farm. Give us the opportunity to write that next chapter, which we're literally chomping at the bit to do.
Okay, well said again. Thank you very much for a passionate plea there. Thank you very much. Brigitte, unfortunately, we have to wrap up this session, but I'm going to now turn around to each one and ask for a one-word, keyword, that is, I suppose we shall describe it as the key ingredient in driving that sustainable livestock sector in Europe. What is the key word for you? One word.
Excellence.
Excellence, okay. Elaine?
Young farmers.
Okay, I'll let you off. Go on. Blondina?
Ecosystems.
Systems. Jan-Erik?
Farm advice.
Farm advice? Very good. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, let's wrap up this session. Thank you very much, Brigitte, for joining us online. To Jan-Erik, Blondine, and Elaine, my thanks to all my panelists. And without further ado, I invite you to return to your seats.